Ladies and gentlemen, another warm welcome from Berlin, Germany to the rest of the world Virtual Ops 2020 season. Another great session today about the new not normal with a guest speaker, Steve Bogie. Before we start the session, just some logistics. We will follow the virtual happy hour format and concept, so everybody can at any time ask questions to Steve and all the other attendees. We want to have a lively dialogue. We have a closed group, so not a mass webinar attendee list. We have only a small group so that everybody has enough face and speak time. And you can use the raise your hand functionality in Teams or just speak up. Before we start the session, I suggest that we start with a short introduction round. So maybe Francisco, you're just telling us for whom you're working and which location you're currently based. Francisco, can you hear us?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Francisco Muñoz, OCC Director of Latin Airlines. The OCC headquarters of Latam Airlines is located in Santiago de Chile. I have 10 years of experience in operation areas in Latam Holding. I work in Brazil, Colombia, and Chile. But I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to having you with us. MG, let's go to South Africa.
Yeah, good morning from sunny South Africa. My name is MG Tauter. I'm currently contracted to Merlot as a Director of Strategic Accounts. And yeah, it's great to meet everybody. It's good to see you again, Daniel. And I'm looking forward to today's presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Let's go to Leipzig. Matthias.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. This is Matthias Pohl. Hi, I'm the head of IT of Aerologic. We are a cargo airline, so we are in the excellent situation to have all of our airplanes still flying around the world. For those of you who are not aware of Aerologic, we are a joint venture basically between Lufthansa Cargo and DHL Express, and we are based in Leipzig, Germany.
If we are in Germany, let's go to Hannover. Lena. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lena Klass. I'm working for TUI. I'm head of IT airline operations, so all the operational systems covering the 24/7 support for all the TUI airlines in the group.
Let's go to Australia. Justin. Justin is just dropping. So then let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel Stecher. I'm Vice President Airline Operations at IBS, and I'm looking forward to a very lively discussion with all of you. Now Justin gives it a second try. So how is Australia today?
Hey, sorry. I was like, I can hear you guys talking, but it's saying that I'm still waiting to connect. Yeah, all good here. I guess quite quiet work-wise, but well, I mean aviation-wise, but busy at my replacement job at the moment. But still trying to get these numbers down and enjoying curfew and not being able to travel more than 5 kilometers from home. So it's all very exciting.
Good. So Steve, the stage is yours, and I'm looking forward to a very not new normal presentation.
Thanks, Danielle. And maybe I'll start with a bit of an introduction of myself, seeing how you've all been through it, and welcome from North America, where it's still morning. And MJ, I'm glad to hear spring is coming there, but that means fall is coming to the Northern Hemisphere. So it's a bit of a sad, happy state between the two of us. So I actually have recently started my own consulting company. I have spent more than 30 years with Air Canada. I began with a regional operation and ran our NOC or our OCC or SOC, depending on who calls what. And in 2004, I moved into the IT group. And similar to Lena, I led the operations IT organization for a number of years. In the last 3 years, I had worked with our business partners across the Air Canada enterprise on IT solutions. So I kind of rode that chasm between the business and the IT organization, even though I did report to the IT organization, but I spent most of my time with the business. So today I'm going to spend a little time talking about what Daniel and I referred to as the new not normal. And as we go through this, I brought up some stats and kind of, I'll call it Steve's view, but hopefully this can be very interactive because I believe there's a lot of opinions on what the new normal will be or won't be. So this is meant to be interactive, so please jump in at any time, and more than happy to have you disagree with me as we go through this, or at least the part where we get to my opinion on things, and maybe not necessarily the stats at the beginning. So why don't we kick it off, Daniel, if you're okay, or did you want to go back and have the last few that joined introduce themselves?
Yeah, Carlos from Lisbon. Do you like to introduce yourself? Just mention the airline and how many years. I think you are an old git, according to your profile. Maybe you can tell us a bit how long you're working for your airline.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Carlos. I'm working at 29 years in airline. I've been around in several airlines, shorter flights, regional flights, but the last years I was in Portugal Airlines, and I changed to TAP Air Portugal in the last year. That's my curriculum. The most of the time I work in flight operations. That's my core business. say so. But I work around in the as a ramp officer and load control, load master. But the most of the time I was a flight operations officer.
And is it already nighttime in Lisbon, or so dark because we only see a black puzzle piece, or is your slider in front of the camera?
No, maybe it's my camera.
Okay.
I'm gonna arrange. No. I think I was mistaken. I think I suppose that my camera is working, but I see what's happening. Maybe it's off. I'm going to deal with that.
So then let's go to Virginia now we can see you. Great. Yeah,
okay. I solved the problem. Okay.
You know, since Saturday, since Sunday, I think Lisbon is a great place for Germans after this great Champions League final.
Okay. I understand.
Let's go to Virginia, to Ira. Some words from your side, please.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so good to see everybody on the air again. I'm sorry, what were you looking for me to talk about? What I'm doing right now?
Name, company, social security number, and all the good things you have done in life.
Okay.
Credit card number would help.
Ira Gershcom with T2RL. And so what we do is analyze the industry systems that are being used, assess and where the markets are going from a technology and customer service standpoint. I'm the operations expert, so I deal with all the operational systems like such as what Daniel supports at IBS, the dispatch, flight planning, crew scheduling, training, all airport functions, all of those. So actually, I'm in the very near a change of life. I'm moving to California in the next couple of weeks for family reasons, and so life is very disorganized right now, but we'll get better.
Thank you, Ira. So, Steve, I think now we are all so eager to know more about your new mod norm.
Okay, let's see if we can get PowerPoint to share here. And can everybody?
We see the slides, maybe? Yeah, now perfect.
Okay, we're good now?
Yes.
Very good, very good.
Okay, you know, as I said in the introduction, this is meant to be interactive, so please feel free to jump in at any point. You know, a little, you know, maybe history for everybody, and you know, those who've been in the industry for a while will know that, you know, we were coming out of 2008 and 2009. You know, in the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, you know, the industry was on a fairly steady upward trend. In 2019, globally, we carried about 3.2 billion passengers on about 4.5 billion trips, which was just over a 4% increase year over year. And the industry recorded collectively a $26 billion profit, which was 3% over the previous year. As well, approximately 1% of all the world GDP was spent on air travel. And aviation globally employed almost 3 billion people. That's kind of direct and indirect. And these are stats that have come out from Statica, ICAO, and IATA that were published, you know, over the last few months as a compare. You know, as we look at 2020, and I've put some of these as what we don't know. So while we have some stats, obviously 2020, we're, you know, kind of late August, you know, almost the end of headed towards the end of Q3, and there's still a lot of opinion on where Q3 and Q4 are going to land us. So, you know, this is what we don't know, and a bit of kind of part of view of the first part of the year. So passenger trips pre-COVID, so pre-March, you know, going in was expected to be 4.7 billion trips. Now, the most recent update from IATA talks about 2.2 billion, so less than half of what was anticipated. In the RPK, so revenue passenger kilometer forecast, is expected to decrease 60%. So 60% of the world's capacity, as we saw in 2019, will be removed in 2020. The first half of 2020 saw a drop in RPKs of about 58%. So, you know, and obviously most of that was, you know, from mid-March on, mainly Q2. And the airline stock valuation has dropped by approximately 70%. There's obviously some variation in that. Some has dropped by 100%, some not quite as significantly. So, you know, the latest outlook from IATA says the industry is expected to report about an $84 billion loss, or a change of $110 billion. And these are US dollars versus 2019. There's been over $200 billion of new debt created. And the interesting part of this, it's not only new debt that's been created, it's debt at a higher cost rating, because obviously all of the lending institutions, the financial institutions, the investors are downgrading stock, downgrading valuation. So the cost of borrowing for anybody within the industry has risen significantly. There's 23 airlines that have ceased to exist since the pandemic was declared. And as everybody knows, many others are restructuring under some sort of protection, some sort of, or receiving government subsidies or other forms of government support to remain in business. and almost something new gets reported in this area almost every week. And, as this continues, that will continue. We've seen in the U.S., the American government has announced about a $58 billion aid package. Just earlier this week was the Swiss airline announcement. So lots of things going on in this space. The World Health Organization, as of the weekend, had reported about 23.5 million COVID-19 cases worldwide, and just over 800,000 deaths is associated with this. They also, they continue to report these, and these numbers will continue to climb over time until they can find a readily available vaccine. There remains numerous restrictions in place around border closures, both internationally and in some cases domestically. And I can tell you, even here in Canada, there are provinces and territories within Canada that travel between them, self-isolation is required. So we struggle even domestically operating flights. The other one that is interesting, I'll talk about it a bit more in a bit. Governments continue to spend literally billions, and in some cases, my friends south of the border, trillions of dollars in pandemic response programs, which I have no debate that there is a need for some of this, but nobody's kind of thought through, I don't believe, the cost of this and how this money gets repaid. We'll talk about it in a little bit, and I'd like kind of people's opinions on this. And the other one, obviously, as we start to open things somewhat, is the customer confidence in travel continues to remain subdued in most portions of the world, and certainly on the international stage. And while airlines are flying, the sense that I'm getting is that it's very relatively low load factors and even lower yields, which obviously cannot continue for an indefinite period of time.
That would be interesting. A question to the audience: who from you were recently flying internationally? Because I'm not flying since end of March. I'm doing everything virtually.
I'm not allowed to leave my country.
We have currently stopped all the business travels in this case, and for private travels, people just most of the time don't do it internationally. In Europe maybe, but that's it.
South Africa has been closed to the world since 18th March and only opened up interprovincial leisure airline travel from last week onwards.
So nobody is traveling here in this audience. Yeah, good. No, not good, of course, but yeah.
yeah. And that's certainly the sense out there. These charts, IATA just produced an update here at the end of July, and nothing more than I think to state the obvious, which most of us know, but certainly the dramatic change in both capacity and passenger volumes and cargo volumes. Obviously, cargo not quite so much, and it's been a bit of a bright spot for a number of carriers. And I can tell you, even with here in North America with Air Canada, in the second quarter, cargo revenue surpassed passenger revenue, which is interesting from a cargo perspective, but very, very disappointing from a passenger perspective, given that, I'll call it pre-COVID, cargo accounted for about 7% of total revenue for the airline. So it gives you some sense as to the revenue hit that the airline took overall. The other piece is, and we talked about this, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is premium demand, as things have wound down. And I think the inverse is expected and interested in people's opinions on this one as well, is generally the feeling seems to be that, whatever the recovery looks like, economy travel or leisure travel will recover faster than premium travel, whether it's business class, first class, whatever it happens to be. So, maybe Daniel, I can ask the group their thoughts on this, and is there any indication they're seeing out of their carriers similar to this?
The domestic carriers in Australia are already seeing that. So although we've still got intrastate border closures, some of the highest traffic route is now domestic routes. So I think the busiest route in Australia at the moment is Brisbane to Cairns, which is wholly within the state of Queensland. Obviously before it was Sydney to Melbourne. However, there's a hard border between those two states, and also Queensland's closed to everybody else. So some of the pundits here are more or less saying, like some of the industry people are saying that most business traffic has, all business traffic has pretty much disappeared, but there is quite some pent-up demand for domestic travel. So once those borders are reopened, they are expecting quite the bounce in at least low fare leisure leisure travel. But yeah, it's exactly what you said. The business travel's all but gone, and will be some time before that comes back. So we're going to be seeing, I think, more breadth of network in the Australian landscape for all, rather than frequency, which was how it usually was.
Down in South Africa, all our premium airlines sort of disappeared overnight. So only two real premium airlines that had premium capacity was South African Airways and British Airways, which was part of Comair. So currently the only operators are low cost and niche. So it's nothing that we can compare against.
Anyone else? Okay, so in the July 30th report from IATA, their latest forecast, they're now starting to talk about a 5-year recovery. And, what I find interesting on this is, and this is part of my thought on the new not normal, because we actually don't know what is coming next. When this first started, there was a lot of talk about this was a 2-month issue, and things would snap back in 2 months. So now there's forecasts out there in the 5-year range from IATA, and if you look at the yellow banding, or the yellow, that's kind of their range of uncertainty, and that range of uncertainty is much wider to the downside of that. So, what that tells me is they're kind of hedging their bets on the lower side of this, more so than the upper side. And I think that plays back into the conversation around premium traffic. And, I'll throw it out there right now. My concern around the government's subsidies is the ability to repay that, and how they tax, whether it's the individuals or the industries, to try and recover those funds that they've been using as subsidies, and what that means for the global economy. So what does all this mean? So, I think, this is not the same as anything we've seen before. There was a lot of comparisons early on to whether you want to talk about 9/11 or, SARS or other kind of incidents that had happened. But, I think this is clearly proven to be much broader than that. It's impacting many sectors, in fact, all sectors of the economy. And again, the government subsidies are well beyond their capacity and capability to fund out of, current funding regimes. So they're going to have to find incremental revenue to be able to repay this, whether it's corporate tax rates, personal tax rates, whatever it happens to be. We still have no clarity on timelines. We've seen now 5 years with IATA. And again, they're kind of hedging their bets on the lower side of that. The other challenge for the carriers is this standardization of restrictions or the criteria as to how you actually reopen some of this. And I'll give you kind of a Canadian/European view of this is the EU has produced a list of countries that they deem low risk and therefore acceptable to travel. However, the Canadian government has not reciprocated. So the EU movement is, I won't say meaningless, but for the average traveler has no impact because Canada has really still closed its borders to all international travel as far as avoiding self-isolation at 14 days. So I think there's got to be some sort of global standard as best we can, at least among most of the developed countries, as to how we reopen borders or how borders get reopened. And, that may give the industry some level of ability to actually forecast what's happening. Technology has proven that remote work environments are completely feasible. And, this is we'll call it a pro and a con. I think there is significant opportunities for organizations, not just within this industry, but generally to do work from home. I think that's proven itself out. There are significant saving opportunities, there are employee satisfaction opportunities. And, as Daniel mentioned to me yesterday as we were exchanging emails, you can travel and work all at the same time. So, there is opportunity here, and I think technology has proven that self out, same as what we're doing today.
MG, you have a question. You are muted. MG, you are muted.
I wanted to mute bingo. So I definitely agree that it's feasible, but in our industry, and I know we all have done this many times, we have been working, flying, doing remote work. For us, it's normal. So when we talk about normal, not normal is the new normal. For us is normal, in a sense. But if you go to every layman, the people that worked in the banks, the people that worked in finance, retail, etc., they have now been forced to move to using this new technology. And I've found that people that are not used to remote work, using this technology, it has an effect on, they either burn themselves out because they're now suddenly available 24 hours, or believe they should be, or you do have those people that sort of disappear. And I have definitely seen with people that I've worked with that are not used to that there's some sort of psychological issues that are occurring based on the new normal of using technology, being remote, the idea of always being online. And that is something that we are addressing in South Africa as well. And it's disconcerting that mental health is now being affected. But I do think that companies might be able to address this within their human resources departments to show people this is how you work. But it's feasible, but it's had a high impact on people's way of living and sometimes even happiness.
And on the other hand, I just read today that Air New Zealand is now offering part of their headquarter for third-party rent. So they are not using their headquarter completely. That has certainly to do that they have maybe also decreased workforce. But I also know from other airlines that they're also discussing, is it really necessary to have all these costly office building if people are working from home? So it has an opportunity, and it has, of course, a drawback, because not everybody has an economic share and table and all that stuff. But I think many airlines are evaluating what is the future workplace for the employees. Carlos, you have a question on that.
It's not a question, it's to confirm that, because at TP we return to the flights, not normally, but we return to some flights. But the people here are 50% are at home with the homework. We have got maybe two-thirds of the office is empty. Nobody is here at the headquarters like it used to be, and that's what I say. Half of the people are at home, and the preview is to continue with that. That's only to confirm this.
How is it in Hannover, Lena?
Well, today I'm officially the only one on this floor. So I went to the office today actually to get out of home because doing home office while you have two little kids which are not going back to kindergarten yet is really a tricky part. So I would say yeah, as MG just said, it's they're different things. I think we in TUI, we were quite lucky that we introduced virtual working quite a year before, and we did a lot of effort into training the people. We had specialized team leads, let's say, who are training the other employees how to use Teams and all that kind of stuff, so they get a bit more familiar to it. So to be honest, everybody here said we were very lucky that we did that a year before Corona, because otherwise I'm not so sure if we would have moved through this crisis, let's say, at least operationally that smooth. We had just last month, we did a complete change of an IT system virtually. If you would have asked me to exchange a core operational system in the running business during summer while everybody is sitting at home, I would have said this is not possible. But the teams demonstrated it works, and they get used to it and they get better. But on the other hand, I see all the other organizations. I talked a lot with friends who work in insurance, for example. They really struggle with home office. They really have other issues. You see that also in the governmental parts. You see that very much in Germany, at least in the schools. They are not prepared for virtual working at all. So I think it really depends on the maturity of digitalization, virtual working of the company, how good they cope with it.
Yeah,
it's exactly where I can also exactly agree on the same. We also just recently made 2 virtual cutovers at totally different geographies in the world. So same situation, implementing a complete new digital operations platform. And if you have asked the team before how to do such an implementation, everybody would of course say that's not possible and we have to be on site and so on. So I think this small little thing called COVID is now also changing things in the positive manner, because I think that's also helping airlines and companies to change things if necessary, even being maybe in a lockdown situation or not being able to travel. And unfortunately, it's always necessary to have an external factor, because if you question this situation before, you would have a lot of naysayers, and now with a personal pain, I think many people are not questioning anymore.
Yeah, and I don't think this is an all or nothing kind of equation, as a number of people have alluded to. And, you know, as I look at a number of organizations, as they start to look at their office, you know, it's more of a, in fact, some of them have done teams. So you don't have everybody in the office. You actually create, you know, Daniel's team and Carlos's team, and, you know, they offset one another and they'll never cross, you know, because you're still trying to minimize cross-contamination as much as possible. There are situations where I actually believe that there are, you know, remote technology is detrimental to your ability to function properly. You start to break down that team environment. You know, and there are certain things that are definitely easier to do in person. You know, I think of mapping exercises and system architecture design and different things, data flows kind of come to mind. But in the same breath, you know, there's also, I think Lena brought up the point, there's getting out of the house, and, you know, is important as well. And you know, certainly there is that mental health piece. You know, I think as humans, we generally want to interact. You know, we crave that interaction and that you know, call it camaraderie or personal interaction. And I think that's important. So there's this balance. The other interesting thing, you know, just on the offices, and, you know, I'll use Air Canada as an example. We have literally furloughed 50% of our employees. So as you start to reconfigure and look at office space, you know, there is opportunities there that need to be addressed as we go forward. Any other thoughts on this point? I think this is a very interesting one.
Yeah, interestingly, when the crisis hit the industry, I was quickly making a small survey with several airlines, how probable it will be that we will have a remote ops control center, for example. And all the people said, yeah, technology is available, it's possible, partially it's done, but there was exactly this criteria that people don't like to have the sole responsibility for something. So that's why they want to have a shared responsibility within the OCC with this collaborative decision making, and meet people, and also, of course, meeting people at the coffee. But all other criteria would make it possible to have a remote or working from home ops and crew tracking, for example.
Yeah, you know, maybe while we're on this, just, you know, a bit of a variation, if you don't mind, Daniel. So again, I'll use the Air Canada experience. I'd be interested in others. So, you know, there was a, you know, we'll call it the management piece was relatively easy to move to remote because they were used to travel, they were used to working remotely. Ops, I'll be very candid, we looked at work from home, and in the end, the big challenge became voice communications, air-to-ground communications. What was the challenge, and what we ended up doing was actually splitting the team between our production site and our hot site, or our backup site, and ran the operation kind of in a split mode, if you will. And then over time, we took areas like contact centers, and we actually fit them up and did Teams trainings, Alina's point, and everything else remotely and on the fly. And we ended up moving about 75% of our contact center staff to a work from home mode, you know, I would say 6 to 8 weeks into this. So, you know, it was a combination of all of those things that allowed us to keep the airline running. So I'd be interested in hear what others' experience was.
I have a comment on this. The technology works. There's no doubt about that. But the effect on productivity is really hard to measure. And I hear stories all over the place of saying, "Well, we're not in the office anymore, so let's rent it out to somebody else." And it's very hard to measure all the things we've been talking about the last 10 minutes. You know, you need your colleagues. It's helpful to have your colleagues next to you to run little ideas by them privately and so forth. And the effect on productivity, I think, cannot be dismissed. And in my own experience with just calling, like credit card call centers, for example, it's just been an awful experience. You get passed around from one to another. There are long wait times, and this is one of the productivity problems associated with this that no one knows how to measure, as far as I can tell. So I think I'm skeptical of the companies that say, "Well, we're happy working remotely, and we're never going back to the office." I just don't believe that's sustainable. Maybe it is, but there are a lot of things we're going to have to learn, and it's going to take something like 5 years to get there. Anyway, food for thought.
Yep. Thanks. Anyone else?
Well, I would agree in terms of going completely working virtual would not happen. I think it will increase immensely. So we had in TUI, we had organizational wise already the possibility to do home office. I think this will not be as limited as before in the future. So it will increase. It will give more flexibility to the people. But I also see either in my team or in other teams that there's a need, or they also want to go back to the office, maybe not for a 5-day working shift, but once in a while. And there, as you said, certain things that are just easier to connect than virtual. Plus, people are getting a bit tired sitting in front of a computer all the time talking. So there's definitely a desire to go back. But I think it will be bigger than before, because it has been proven that in a lot of areas it's doable. And also in terms of what we were discussing earlier, in terms of cost saving, you can see that the management, as you said, were doing a lot of traveling beforehand, always meeting in certain areas and so on. Now they experience over the last 6 months, they can manage a company with virtual meetings quite well. Also, that will have an impact on the amount of, let's say, costs, or I mean, because they will be all cost sensitive later on. That will have an impact on how much business travel will happen, because we've proved that there's a lot of opportunities to talk virtually and do all these meetings virtually.
What I believe might also positively influence the future of working from home and being in the office is that you can decide on your own what is the right deployment method maybe in this week. At the moment, people are all forced to stay home. And if you are forced, you are usually not doing things in the same manner like you're doing it voluntary. So that's maybe the influence in the future, if there's a vaccine, if there are working models where you have the flexibility to do maybe 2-3 days working from home, 2 days in the office, and then also the airline is kind of calculating the remaining space they need. Maybe you can have a silver lining, reduced office building space, and people can also have a work-life balance in the sense of taking care of elderly people, also organizing their private life and still being very productive because they know, okay, if I'm working from home these 2 to 3 days, then I'm always on, and the other days maybe I have it more relaxed while being in the office. But that's my personal opinion on that.
Yep.
That's how. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that's how companies are starting to structure in Australia now. So it's going to be legislated that there's maximum capacities for a fairly lengthy period of time coming into buildings of around 50% to maintain that social distancing. So what companies are doing is they've actually are making that offer of having must come into work 2 days a week, but it will be specific 2 days a week, and or essentially people are rostered to come in. Mainly from a distancing and people coming into the office. Public transit and all of those are still limited. That's what we're doing down here, but there will be. There has been a massive shift towards flexible working, but exactly what Lena was saying before is that a lot of people aren't used to it and can't handle it and need to have that human communication, and mental health concerns are starting to come in, particularly for those who live on their own, but also for those who have children as well. It's a chance to get out of the house, to go to work, when the kids are at school, and especially when home learning is the thing. I don't know if it's the same in Northern Hemisphere, but yes, at home learning is everyone's learning at home at the moment. So it's everyone's at home doing nothing, and everyone's just getting on top of each other.
Homeschooling is really hard. If you're a parent and you say, well, I'll just homeschool my children, that's got to be really hard because you need to have something for them to do every day. Teachers can do it because that's their job, but I think it would be pretty hard for a parent.
MG, you have a question on that?
Yeah, just my my final point on that is being separated from everybody is not normal. So I think we all agree with that. And I just want to repeat something that Daniel and I discussed on a very nice VHH session a month or two ago, and is that the word social distancing for me is incorrect. We should stop with social distancing and just call it physical distancing, because we are making ourselves even more unsocial and even putting ourselves in chains by calling it social distancing, because it's a mind frame that I'm now distant socially, both on a physical and on an emotional level, even business level, from my peers. And that just non-committal like that can actually have an effect on people's mental health.
Exactly. So there are two misconceptions in our industry. It's in the world. One is physical distance, and the other one it's not dynamic pricing. So these are the two misconceptions we have currently a lot of discussing around the world.
Okay. Anyone else? The other one, just maybe to kind of end on this one, is I also think that this has changed a lot of the maybe senior or executive management's sights on things. And, the sense I get is, well, prior to this, and Lena talked about TUI moving forward, or moving forward a year ago, which was advantageous, there was certain executives in organizations that didn't believe in this and actually so there was a policy, almost an unwritten policy around coming to the office, which I think will obviously have to change as we move back to whatever that new normal happens to be. Okay. E-commerce cargo traffic has increased dramatically, and we've seen that. And, we all, wake up every morning and run to the front door and see what Amazon has dropped at our doorstep. And I think in our industry, there is an opportunity around the e-commerce side and the technology side to take advantage of some of this. And, I think about items simply as self-service tools. We talked in the last conversation around long wait times to get through to this, that, and the other thing. For most seasoned travelers or most, younger generation tech-savvy people, they don't want to talk to necessarily individuals, particularly if it's going to hold you on the line for an extended period of time. So I think there's a self-service opportunity, mobile, I should be more specific, mobile self-service opportunity here for the carriers. And then the biosecurity concerns, and we've seen this, as we start to put flights back in the air and reopen some borders. There is a lot of hesitation, and we're certainly not, I don't believe that there is the traffic returning even as quick as the capacity is returning. And this is not unique to air travel, certainly in the cruise lines as well. And even, and I'd be interested in it's a bit of a segue, but, here, at least in the Toronto area, we're seeing it in public transit as well. There's actually a move to, and car manufacturers are reporting upticks in small car sales, and people are staying away from maybe not core downtown public transit, but more regional transit where, typically trains would be 10, 15, 20 kilometers outside the city and people would commute in. Those still remain virtually empty as traffic on the road. I won't say it would be back to pre-pandemic levels, but it's certainly, in the early pandemic days, it's significantly increased. So there seems to be a change away from public transit, and I liken it back to the confidence in people to physically distance or be secure in that environment.
How do you see the future technologies also then coming on the table, like flying taxis, urban travel, all these things which are also already kind of surrounding the airline industry?
So, but we still, most of those still rely, Daniel, on, flying taxis might be one thing, but I think about things like Hyperloop, and you're still talking about mass transit, and, flying taxis are just removing traffic or congestion from a road to an airspace. It won't be very long. In most major cities, the airspace is just as congested as the roadways. So I don't see that as a long-term solution. We're going to have to get ourselves around the biosecurity question in the major centers, in my mind. And, that is a sense of technology. You're seeing things like UVC cleansing on mass transit vehicles. There's a couple of companies now that have produced, we'll call them robots, very simplified robots for aircraft and, train/subway kind of public transit sterilization. So I see it heading a little more in that direction than I do flying taxis myself, but open to, be interested in what others think.
So I agree with what you say, Steve. The only thing that comes up to me when you say that is another itemized line on anything that I buy that would say biosecurity tax.
Yeah.
So I foresee that whenever we travel again, or cruise travel, or even public transport, there will be a biosecurity tax to fund or maintain these new technologies that are supposed to keep us safe.
Yep. Okay. So we talk about we've talked about some of this, the path forward. I think there's got to be a pragmatic methodology for travel restrictions to be lifted and borders reopened. Government stimulus versus subsidies, and this is kind of beyond this group, but it's interesting watching governments react. And there are certain governments that have created stimuli in the form of job incentives, work incentives, building infrastructure as a way to keep industry moving or keep regions moving versus subsidy. Personally, I'm a big fan of that versus subsidies. I think subsidies are very short term, tends to be a bit of throwaway money in my mind. It's not sustainable. Back to our tax question, or that MJ just brought us back to. And now that we're starting to look at 3, 4, 5 years, you need something much more sustainable to keep these industries going. The other thing that to be very candid, I think there are going to be additional failures and or consolidations with the industry. There are, if we use, as we have been 2019 as a benchmark, for passenger travel, as the industry's ability to survive at the level that they were, trying to sustain something less than that over the next 4 to 5 years is not realistic. So we need to let that happen. I call it the cycle of life, and it's not unique to the airline industry. You see it, with brick and mortar stores and long-standing organizations almost daily. We talked about remote work locations. I actually, think that's just going to be part of it. And it in my mind, it's going to be a hybrid. It's not going to be an all or nothing. And I think you're going to have a choice, and some will be easier than others. And as travel starts to come back, particularly within our industry, there is going to be continued pressure on the cost side of the equation, and to remove buildings, facilities, very expensive infrastructure will be looked at hard and often. Business travel, I think I think Lena talked about it a minute ago. We're not traveling as much. I think, this is proven to a lot of business leaders that they don't need to travel as much, and the cost pressures will be on, everybody. This is not a aviation industry specific problem, and travel is always something that is looked at hard, and usually first things to be cut when money gets tight in business. So, that'll create added pressure in the aviation space. E-commerce, we talked about. I think e-commerce has and technology has a very significant role to play, whether it's cost savings, process savings, customer experience. Customers will only tolerate long wait lines or calls. We need to find a different way to do business. And I think whether it's mobile self-serve opportunities, enhanced technology in those spaces, and it could be, you talk about in the airport's environment, there is opportunities around biometrics to streamline the touchless process as you go through an airport. Biosecurity will remain a significant concern until there are tested and proven and widely available vaccines around this. And then I kind of touch on the technology piece. I think is a huge piece. The one I'll add to is efficiency initiatives, and particularly unique to the aviation space. And if I look at our ability to use our manpower, our ability to optimize resources, whether it be physical resources, human resources, financial resources, I think there's a role for technology to play in there. And you can talk about AI, you can talk about different things about how you optimize, whether it's your aircraft, your crews, your aircraft slots, your airport gates. All of those play into that. And with that, I'm going to end and open up for questions, comments, feedback. This is the part where you get to tell Steve he's wrong.
No, first of all, regarding this technology thing, maybe you can go one slide back. Interestingly, there's a big focus on touchless things here and there.
Yeah.
But interestingly, last week I learned from a German scientist that he said if the entire world would wear for 4 weeks a face over, the virus would be killed. And he was emphasizing on also air changes and ventilation in rooms, especially now approaching autumn and winter times where people cannot just open windows to get fresh air. And he was saying there's also technology available that you can really let the students go to school and university, but you need to change the air because the main topic is now the aerosols. And that will be interesting to see whether technology is then helping airports to identify passengers who are not wearing their mask in the right manner, and that quickly there is somebody who is handing it over. Because I think that's the main topic at the moment, how to cope with the aerosols which are in the air for hours. And if you're not wearing a mask, you can even get an infection by breathing these aerosols. So that's why I would put this as an additional technology item that we need to make sure that we have enough changes of fresh air in airports, and also buses bringing us maybe to the boarding process, and in duty-free areas and so on, and also in launches where you have a lot of wait time maybe.
Well,
Lena.
Maybe to add to that, it was just yesterday in the German TV, a very interesting thing they did in a test in schools, let's say, to check on the air quality after 15 minutes, after 20 minutes, and the effect of opening the window and letting in fresh air, and how to cope with that. And I mean, there are detectors for the CO2 level in the room already, and based on that, you can let's say evaluate the amount of aerosols in the room, and you could say, okay, if you reach this level of CO2, because then the air is like consumed a lot, you could say, well, this is now the point to open all the windows and get in fresh air. And these kind of ideas or techniques already exist, and if this will be a bit more advanced and a bit more developed, I would say, there could be a perfect option to say, well, in schools, in offices, whatever, you have some kind of, let's say, we do have fire detectors these days. Why don't we have aerosol or whatever virus detectors in a couple of years in the buildings or in the airport or wherever?
No, agreed.
Maybe
Yeah,
Steve, if you stop the screen sharing, then we see everybody. Maybe then.
Yep.
Good.
Similar to what Lena has said, is we know HEPA filters work. They work on the aircraft, and we've seen simulations. Why not make, if we have water sprinklers as regulations, why not have HEPA filters as regulations for all new buildings going forward? Right, so we can look at emerging technologies, but also let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Use our existing technology as well as a middle ground. One thing that we do need to lose is that saying "avoided like the plague," because obviously after COVID-19, that saying doesn't work because people were not avoiding it. That's the issue.
Yeah, interestingly, in one of the virtual happy hours and also virtual Ops 2020 session, one of the attendees was mentioning that they are also now offering training for passengers. So usually you focus on training of staff, pilots, and cabin crew to cope with the situation. And they were saying they are also now offering training for their passengers who have to cope with the situation, who have to adapt, and who have to follow the new processes and requirements. That was quite interesting remark, which might be also a revenue opportunity if you sell this to passengers before the flight, or you are somehow forcing them to go through such a training before they are eligible for a flight with that airline.
So prior to the check-in, they have to do basically a check-in procedure, but now includes a training on how to conduct yourself during the travel.
So how is TAP doing at the moment? You are starting to fly, as you said. Are you also making trainings for the passengers? And how are you using technology to cope with the new not normal?
I think we don't change many things. We are trying to fly. Yes, we are we have got 150 flights per day. Normal would be 400 because we are low in the number of flights we're doing for the day. But no, we put the masks only, the instruction for the passengers. We're trying to promote the social distance in the airports, but no, we don't invent anything so far away. We are waiting for the industry to tell us the best deal to do it with it. No ideas at the moment, or new ideas for dealing with the problem. I think we are in the shadow of the problem. We don't know how to react to this. It's all new, and we are expecting that the vaccine will appear and solve this problem, and the passengers coming back with the measures, with the normal measures we have. In the office, yes, like I said before, in the office, yes, we don't work before this situation at home, and now we are working at home. How much it's possible, but the passenger's point of view, no, it's everything regulated like before.
You know that Portugal is one of the benefiters of this crisis.
Yes.
Because
in a way.
Because you can keep your European champion title for one more year, usually, and also the Champions League final was moved from Istanbul to Lisbon. So
we are synchronized. I remember that many times. We are the first country who keep the title 2 years. That's it. We don't have chance to win that title anymore. So it's nice to have 2 years for this.
Francisco, are you also making now remote control working from home, or are people all going to the LATAM office for work?
Hi. The OCC of LATAM in this moment is in home, staying home, because the government in South America closed the borders. Colombia, for example, Peru opened it last month. So the operation by LATAM is 20% of the real or normal operation pre-COVID. So in this moment, my team, my staff, the OCC stayed at home, work in the virtual meetings. It's possible. It's possible, and everybody has your laptop and has your telephone in your laptop. It's helped to work in that. So it's possible, but the CEO of Latam said the last week it's probably will go back on November, and I don't know. We are preparing, put the desk chills in the on desk in the OCC sala, and social distance, put one person in one person and next to the 2 meters the next person. So I don't know, I try, but we can work in the home in this moment.
And usually I remember when I was in Santiago de Chile that the LATAM OCC was one of the most vibrant I've ever visited in my life. So you could really feel the Latin American energy, and now it's so calm. So that is really, or surely not the new normal then in Santiago de Chile.
Yes. Yes. But I think how Lina said, we need the see the another people, stay close to another, talk with the people, because when you work in home, stand in front the laptop all day, call with cell phones on in the meeting groups, it's very impersonal, but it's the new normal reality.
So is the open office concept that's now become so popular, was it actually a good idea?
I don't know. The open concept of office, probably yes, probably not, depends of the interaction needed. So so for the airlines, I think need try it with the new strategies, new position, maybe mix it, working home and work in office. So I think we need try it different strategies and use the better work.
Yakmur, how is it in Istanbul with the Pegasus Airlines? You are also working from home at the moment?
Hello. We are working from home, but especially the people who must go to the office, they go. But generally, we work from the home, and not just for airline sectors, the other sectors like banks or e-commerce, all the how can I say high quality marks work from home, but other little workspaces like little have little I don't say we work from home generally.
And usually, if you are not working from home, how much time you commute every day from home to get to the Pegasus office? Is this minutes or is it almost an hour or even longer?
Almost an hour.
Because I
Yeah.
think that will be then later on also the decision, maybe Lena, as you said, that people don't like to work from home. They want to get to the office. But if you work in a city where you have a very big traffic congestion and you have to commute 1 or 2 hours and you are losing 2 or 4 hours per day, and at the same time you can take care of parents, children, or make also your shopping requirements. That is, I think, something which people will cherish. So I think and if you are just living 10 minutes of your workspace, of course, then you go to the office. But I think there are some places in the world where traffic is really making a big problem for people.
Actually, for me, it's very good working from home. I don't have a child and I am living alone, and I can focus more deeply than the office, because in office people ask something and you always interrupt someone by the someone, and it's, for me, it's very good. But how you say that when people have child or other responsibilities about home or the outside works, it's very difficult for them. And the traffic, my home is like 1 hour or 1 hour and 30 minutes away from my office. It's very good, and I wake up at 7:30 when the work started. It's good to sleep, and I think it's good. I can live all my life like this.
Yeah, I'm working here in a co-working space, so I have a distinct split between private life and work. But still, my wife is asking me every day, when are you going to travel again? And this has also, I think, some consequences where some people prefer that people have to go to the office. So that's why I'm counting the days that I can come to Istanbul and Toronto and Lisbon and Hanover.
Actually,
you keep saying you're coming to Australia, but you've not come down here yet, Danielle.
Yeah,
I
three times you told me you're coming down here.
Sorry, that's one of the things about working from home, dogs as well, is don't go to Australia. Everything there wants to kill you.
Yeah, I'm very friendly with all of my colleagues' dogs now. We always know everyone else's dog when you hear them in the background. But it's quite funny you're talking about them. There's been some strange things happen, at least in Australia, throughout all of this with markets and pricing and everything. Like housing is a big one at the moment. So everyone initially thought that the housing market, the bottom was going to fall out of it, and it's been true for the city housing market, but the regional market, so 2 or 3 hours drive out of the capital cities, they're absolutely booming. Like housing prices are just going through the roof at the moment, because everyone's realized, they can all work at home now, and all of these companies are saying, okay, no, you must now work at home forever. And everyone's like, oh, screw this, I'm not going to live in the city anymore and go and live in the countryside. So it's actually been quite good for regional centres in Australia. But yeah, it's interesting to see what's going to happen in the cities over the next few years.
You've seen that in the Toronto area as well.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I can imagine, I mean, especially in Germany, we had that in the beginning of the crisis a lot, that people were very happy living outside of the city, because if you're forced to stay at home, or if you imagine you're like 20 days or 14 days in quarantine, I mean, how great is it to have your own garden to sit outside? And if you're like squeezed in a small apartment in the city, it would be nice if you could go to a pizzeria, but if it's closed, and it doesn't help. So
That's the thing. I have some very good friends of mine living in Brandenburg, and one's working in Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, and the other one at Schönefeld Airport, and they're both forced to work at home now. So they're getting an hour of commute each way, so 2 hours a day back into their life because they don't need to go into Berlin anymore. So they're loving working at home.
Yeah, and just adding to that is same what Daniel said. I think it will be different very much depending on the personal situation. If you have a lot of traveling to work, which is like, say, dead time of 1.5 hours just sitting in the car to wait to get to the office, it's a really good opportunity to work from home. On the other hand, there's the social interaction piece where you say, well, once in a while, it's also good to see someone individually and have a 3D virtual experience.
Yeah, I think it's also depending if you know what is coming, you can better prepare. I'm very happy that I just bought by the end of last year a new PC for myself, and then being at home I had the right infrastructure, but many people didn't know, and they also didn't know that they have to stay, and I have huge respect for all my Indian colleagues who are in a very tough lockdown since weeks and months. If you know that you will have a lockdown, you would probably maybe look for maybe one more room or in a different region. And I think that's the problem all over the world, that in certain places the infrastructure and the environment is not so beneficial for the people, and they still have to cope with the situation, and then not having the possibility to go out, to let the energy out, to be really squeezed. So that's something where I hope things will improve very soon, that people are not freaking completely out.
But even getting that infrastructure is difficult. I don't know about in other places, but in Australia, when lockdown started happening, so in April particularly, it was so hard to actually go and buy a decent laptop or computer at home because everyone had just gone and buy it. Like even now, I'm waiting 4 weeks for a new Mac to be imported from I assume it's coming from China. But yeah, 4 weeks to get a new PC, just because it's just so short stock everywhere, and supply chains are taking so long to move devices around the place.
Yeah. So Steve, you were very pessimistic. So, but imagine we have now already a Russian vaccine out. I think India is doing something. USA, Germany. Let's say beginning of next year we have a vaccine, and there's enough vaccine also for the business travelers and so on. Will there not be then also a big push that people say, oh, finally I can see my business friends. I have to create business because we were on a financial trouble, and everybody is pushing it through. Is that not a possibility which are you seeing at the horizon?
So, and I should have started the presentation by, I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic. I was trying to interpret some of the information that's out there, and particularly the when you look at IATA's 5-year forecast. But, I think, Daniel, to your point, there will be some pent-up demand, but I see it more on the leisure side. I think generally speaking, most businesses are going to be very cost conscious, and there will be business travel. I'm not saying it's going to go away and we're going to go strip out, business class cabins and first class cabins out of aircraft again. However, I think, the sales folks who, and probably within the airline industry, we were worse than anybody because, quote unquote, you could travel for free. You would jump on an airplane and go to a meeting when maybe you really didn't have to. And I think there's going to be lots of pressure not to do that, and to do, meetings just like what we've done for the last hour and 29 minutes. Because we've proven that. And I think that's going to reset, at least in the short to medium term, the benchmark of the business leisure ratio that, most airlines, certainly legacy airlines who run mixed configurations, are going to be faced with. And stemming from that is, the vast majority of the revenues from those airlines come from that front cabin or the front two cabins, depending on how you're configured. So I think it's going to reset the reality for a lot of those carriers. Those that were focused on the leisure space, those that were focused on the leisure travel, it'll be different. I think they'll be much more adaptable. And you've even seen, the Southwest. I don't know if anybody saw, there was an interesting map that came out of Southwest. They just looked at their October schedule and pulled back, I think it was 123 routes from their October schedule. Continental US, obviously, but just an interesting. So they're not seeing those forward bookings that even they'd anticipated. So MJ?
Yeah, I'm just wondering out loud, is we're all waiting for a vaccine. Now, that's all good enough. We get a vaccine. With our medical expertise and us, it's more than 100 years since Louis Pasteur. But here comes a vaccine. It works.
Yeah.
Now we have the following question. How do we use that vaccine? And does an airline require that vaccine for you to fly on them, or does a country say you need to do that vaccine? So if airlines and countries, let's for example, in Africa, in Asia, certain countries, certain airlines, you require a yellow fever certificate.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to go the same route with COVID-19, and where airlines and countries are going to say, well, if you don't have a certificate of vaccine, you're not allowed to enter the country? Because it's nice to have it, but if people are not going to take it, it sort of loses its meaning.
It's an interesting question, because my sense is I haven't heard anybody talk of, a vaccine, a global vaccine certificate policy. But what I do start to hear is, we've been through SARS, we've been through, various pieces, prior smaller scale pandemics. What's next? And do we prepare ourselves for the next one? Because I really think, and for most of the globe, when this started, we believed that this was we'll call it a China issue or an Asia issue. And, I think history will dictate that, agencies were slow to react, and that probably caused some of the widespread effects that we've seen. So I think my sense is that as we look forward, there's going to be a more of a view to how do we prevent the next one? Because I don't think this is the last, as much as I hate to say it. So,
and probably Lena wanted to say something. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it was we kind of went to a different topic, which I think is an interesting one to say, how do we react? And I totally agree with you, Steve, to say, well, I think it's not this one COVID-19 issue. It shows a lot of our weaknesses in the systems in terms of response, in terms of medical systems to collapse. I mean, we need to be clear also that a lot of these measures in countries have been taken not just to prevent people from dying, but also from medical infrastructure to collapse because of the amount of infected people. So also that is a weakness in a lot of countries where we see a lot of issues that we say, well, we should, in the future going forward, preventing any of the virus infection, we need to be aware of that the people working in hospitals and senior residencies and so on need to be paid properly, they need to be equipped properly, and we need to have a big invest for this area as a society, I would say, because that will easen up a little bit the situation to cope with the amount of potential infections in the future.
And potentially
Agreed.
we need a World Travel Organization like we have the World Health Organization, and this organization needs to coordinate all the border restrictions, because what you said, the European Union is doing that and Canada is doing something else, which is exactly also hindering that travel can kick off again. So we are at the end of our session. I just want to give you some information about the upcoming sessions. So we have more sessions to come. So we have scheduled for next week and over next week additional sessions. If you like to attend these Virtual Ops 2020 sessions, would be great. And Lena, I hope I can also have you on the 3rd Aviation Women panel on the 3rd of September. And I think also the topic of bridging the gap or building the bridge between airline operations and air cargo is something which might be interesting for some of you. I like very much the atmosphere. It was a very special Virtual Ops 2020 session today, talking about the new not normal. And I wish you a good rest of the day or good night, and please stay healthy and safe. And thank you very much, Steve, for a great presentation.